Hi there. This presentation will illustrate how important our three macronutrients are to our metabolic health. I'll explain on the video biologically and biochemically what happens in our body. So we'll start off with just listing our three macronutrients. We've got carbohydrates, and they convert to glucose once they're in our body. We've got proteins, which break down into amino acids once they're in our bodies. And the third macronutrient is fats, which break down into fatty acids once they're in our body. Our most important organ in the context of this presentation is our pancreas because it secretes insulin in response to the glucose that we eat. I will just present a little preamble about how insulin and glucose are related. So a normal adult has 5 liters or 5 quarts of blood in our body. Our bloodstream can only tolerate 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of sugar at one time. Any higher than this for a sustained period of time, and our body gets very sick. Once sugar's in our bloodstream, it's converted to glucose, so I'm going to refer to it as glucose throughout the rest of this presentation. And I'm going to just use orange juice as an example to present this concept. So orange juice has 23 grams of sugar in 1 cup. So we're going to pretend we drank a cup of orange juice. 23 grams of sugar or 5.5 teaspoons glucose. Okay, so insulin's job is to take any sugar that's over 4 grams or teaspoon in our blood and get it out of there because, like I said, any sustained value of glucose in our blood elevated over a long period of time will make us really sick. So it's going to take, it needs to get essentially 23 minus 4, it needs to get 19 grams or 4.5 teaspoons of glucose out of our blood. Through complex systems, it will end up being stored as body fat. 3 exclamation marks. So we'll just review this screen for a bit. A normal adult has 5 liters or 5 quarts of blood in their system, and we can only tolerate 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of sugar or glucose in our blood at once. Therefore, drinking a cup of orange juice, which has 23 grams, insulin has to come and get that glucose out of there in order for us not to get super sick. Where does it go? Through complex system. It is basically stored as body fat. So 23 grams from 4 grams, I just want to point out that this is a glucose spike. That is a significant glucose spike. 23 grams. We should really, our body really can't tolerate too much past 35 or 40 grams of glucose per meal. And a lot of people are eating 100 grams per meal. So I'm just going to carry on with this presentation and just dig deep on our macronutrients to show you biochemically what happens in our body that we're not even aware of. So I'm just going to draw a graph here. And this is a blood glucose graph. And normal blood glucose, if you live in most parts of the world, is measured in millimoles per liter, and it's 4.0 to 5.6. If you live in the US, they use a unit of measure of milligrams per deciliter. And so their normal values are 70 to 100. Nevertheless, whichever country you live in and whatever unit of measure you're using, right in here is the normal blood glucose range we're going to work with for this presentation. I'm going to use myself as an example of what I did in my 40s and how I messed myself up so that you can learn from my example. And I'm going to incorporate these macronutrients into the learning. So I would eat breakfast. This I would eat breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have oatmeal porridge. Okay, so oatmeal is a carbohydrate, and all I did was drive my glucose up. Insulin had to come to the rescue and get my glucose right back down to safe levels again. Then 10:30 would come around, and I'd get a craving. I would grab an apple. Apples full of glucose. I would spike my sugars. Apples are not innocuous. They have a lot of glucose, 20 grams. It depends, like give or take, depends what kind of apple and the size of it, but lots of glucose. Insulin, again, has to come to the rescue and get my glucose right back down to safe levels in my blood. Then 12:30 would roll around. It's lunchtime. I would feel, I'm only halfway through my day and I feel like this already. I'm going to eat my sandwich, which is essentially bread. Again, carbohydrates, releasing glucose in my blood, drive my blood glucose up. Insulin again has to come to the rescue, get that blood glucose right back down to safe levels in my bloodstream. 2:30 would roll around. I'm feeling low energy. I would grab a granola bar. We all thought that granola was healthy. No, it's not. Full of carbs, converts to glucose. There we go. Super spike in blood glucose. Insulin coming to the rescue again, driving that back down to safe levels. Okay, 5 p.m. I'm home from work. I am hangry. I'm making supper, but I can't wait. I snack on crackers while I'm making supper. What do crackers do? They're a carb, lots of carbs, spike my glucose. Insulin to the rescue again. Get that blood glucose right back down to safe levels. And then 8 p.m. rolls around. I feel a little bit agitated. I don't know how I feel. Anxious. I don't want to go to bed like this. So I go to the fridge and grab one of those yogurts, the one kind with fruit and sugar, like Yoplait. Full of sugar. Blood glucose goes up. Insulin to the rescue again to get that blood glucose back down. So what happens in this graph? I've got 6 spikes and crashes throughout my day. No wonder I feel like crap. So when we're revisiting this graph, here's our normal blood glucose levels. So I'm just going to take my finger and draw a line like that. And then these triangles are all blood glucose spikes. The higher the spike, the more insulin that needs to be released in response. And some foods trigger a higher spike than others. So what does this mean to us? Well, like we learned in the other slide, I'll teach you insulin does a lot of jobs, but the 2 main jobs that insulin does is I'm going to use a blue. Stores excess glucose as body fat. How does that relate to this graph? Well, it takes all these orange triangles and stores all of this as body fat. Orange triangles equal body fat. It's noteworthy just to note that once insulin is in our bloodstream, it stays there for 2 hours. This is important to know for my next point on what the other thing that insulin does. Okay, so once insulin is in the body, like I said, it stays there for 2 hours. The other important job that insulin does as it relates to our metabolic health is it inhibits lipolysis. What does this mean? It blocks body fat burning. What does this mean on this graph? Okay, well, in my day, back in my 40s, I was incorporating working out on the treadmill or the elliptical at least once a day. And I couldn't figure out how come I'm trying to eat healthy, I'm exercising, and I'm getting fatter, and I'm not losing weight. And I went to my doctor, asked him, he told me I'm in perimenopause and that's the way of life. Well, okay, so no, I learned differently. So, as I said, insulin stays in our body for 2 hours once it's in there. Well, look at this timeline. We got 8 o'clock, 10:30, 12:30, 2:30, 5 p.m., 8 p.m. Essentially, all day long, I have elevated insulin levels. We were never meant to have these extraordinary high insulin levels all day long. Um, so I could be like basically because once insulin is in our bloodstream and it blocks body fat burning, I have insulin in my body all day long. I could be working out till the cows come home. I am not going to burn body fat. So, to answer my question that I asked my doctor, these triangles, these elevated glucose spikes are why I was putting on fat. And um, the consistent elevation of insulin in my body all day long is why I couldn't burn any body fat. So, what does this mean? Okay, this will, when we get to proteins and fat, this will answer a question. So, we only covered carbohydrates so far. So, let's get to proteins and fats. After learning, I switched my breakfast to bacon and eggs. And I know that there's fat in there, but we'll get to fat. I'm going to just use the concept of protein there right now. This is what happens. This is how our body responds to when we eat protein. So I'm going to start the same point. So notice minimal elevation in blood glucose, minimal insulin needs, if any. Sometimes our own metabolism will burn off that sugar before insulin is even required to come down and save the day and take care of that little piece. So that's what happens with protein. And I'm just going to jump into fats right now too, because they basically go hand in hand with explaining this concept. So fat, I still do. I put butter and heavy cream in my coffee. And I drink a lot of coffee. I'm drinking 4 or 5 cups in the day before lunch. So I'm getting fat. And so this is how our body responds to fat when we eat it in the context of blood glucose. Zero blood glucose elevation, zero insulin surges in response to this. So what does this mean? This means that I am not getting these crashes. I'm getting a really nice rounded hill, which means my sense of fullness is sustained. It's a concept called satiety. I don't get hungry. I round this, eat my meal, and then here I don't get into cravings or energy lows. And I make my next meal and I eat it, and they're healthy, and I don't zero cravings. So what else happened here? I didn't get these orange triangles, these glucose spikes. So I didn't have to have insulin come in and take these glucose spikes and store them as body fat in my body. And because I didn't have insulin in my bloodstream, when I do exercise now every day, I'm actually burning body fat off my body. So, yeah, it took me about 18 months to do this, to lose my body fat. And, but yeah, the most important thing, I wasn't putting more on also. Now, getting to this chronically elevated insulin. I never had that in my body anymore, and I still don't. And I will, I swear to God, I'll continue not to have that. Like I said, we were never meant to have these elevated insulin levels all day long. Insulin is very caustic, and it is like turpentine running through the inner lining of our blood vessels, creating inflammation throughout our whole body. It shows up with different diseases. It'll cause cancers, cardiovascular disease. As we know, it'll cause diabetes with all this insulin resistance, but it's also causing Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, PCOS, erectile dysfunction, so many diseases, chronic kidney disease. So, yeah, in the 18 months, I likely started off with the insulin resistance and just didn't know about it. But I've reversed all of this in my body. And I'm on a really good trajectory now not to get any of those diseases. I feel amazing. And that's one of the trade offs we have to think about is when we feel impulsive or love certain foods and think we're addicted to them, we get that sugar rush and that dopamine fix for all of like 3 or 10 minutes. Well, you got a whole day of feeling fabulous because you don't have to trade off for those energy lows and feelings of cravings and everything. So I can sustain my energy for 14 hours a day, and then I sleep well also. So that is basically our three macronutrients and how they relate to our metabolic health. Thank you for watching.